Welcome to the program. My guest is one of the most esteemed and sought-after analysts of the political scene in America today, Larry Sabato. He is the founder and the executive director of the University of Virginia's Center for Politics. Larry, it is always a personal privilege to have you on this program and to be able to engage in this conversation with you. And I cannot thank you enough for making time for this program.
I'm happy to do it. We've known each other for years, and I've promised you I would. So
yes, thank you so much.
Promise delivered. You can tell I'm not a politician.
Because you deliver on your promises.
There you go. That's right.
I want to start with, I'm not going to ask you, have you ever seen a race like this before? Because I know you haven't.
Exactly.
But what has crossed your mind? Just begin with some general thoughts about this truly unprecedented, precedented in modern times at least, historic election for the presidency of the United States that we are all riveted by in America today.
Obviously, the two candidates make it a very unusual race. Both of them have high unfavorables, but I think probably it's Donald Trump that makes this a very different kind of race. One of our two major parties rejected 16 people who had experience for someone who has never held any major elective or appointive office. That is not only highly unusual, but it raises important questions about the health of our democracy. And he's a very, very controversial individual on top of that. Well, so is Hillary Clinton, I understand that, but no one can question whether she is qualified to be president, given the long history of involvement in government, elective and appointive. So it's a very different kind of contrast, and it's one that once the election is over is going to raise a lot of questions, and I think particularly for Republicans, the party has become riven with factions, and the factions hate one another more than they dislike the Democratic Party. We remember a time when Democrats were like that. They had so many factions that spent more time trying to destroy the other factions in the Democratic Party that Republicans ended up prospering. But it's time for, if not a change, then some very thoughtful decisions by Republican leaders and by rank and file voters.
Right. So that three-legged stool that has always supported and united the Republicans, you know, the business wing, the moderate Republicans, the sort of libertarian faction, the social conservatives, they've always sort of managed to be on the same page when they needed to be. What upset that stool? What happened? It can't just be said, well, it was just this one man, Donald Trump. What was happening in the Republican Party that gave us Donald Trump?
Well, I think you can take the long view, look at what's happened to the Republican Party, even just since George W. Bush. The very first election after Obama was elected president was the Tea Party revolution of 2010. Well, the Tea Party revolution was about rejecting the establishment, meaning virtually anybody who'd held public office, whether they could win or not, many times nominating people who were not able to win, and they went well to the right. The same thing happened certainly in 2014. Mitt Romney got the nomination. He was an establishment Republican, but it wasn't easy for him to get the nomination, and McCain was pretty much the same thing. But this is a party that in many respects has been at war with itself since Obama became president.
So after Trump loses, which all the analysts are projecting now that is most likely and most probable, what happens to the Republican Party, you think? I mean, are we going to see another Tea Party moment like we saw after Obama won in 2008, where the party gets yanked even further to the right? Is there any more room on the right for them to go? I mean, I seriously wonder that, because we're already seeing a John Birch candidate. I mean, this is quite remarkable.
Well, he's odd in that on social issues, some social issues, he's not all that conservative. He kind of rejects the usual Republican pattern. It's again the combination of style and maybe in terms of government, lack of substance. So he's an unusual nominee in lots of different ways. But look, we've been thinking about this for quite some time at our crystal ball operation. we've had Hillary Clinton way ahead all year long once it was clear that Trump was going to be the nominee. In fact, we're right back where we were in the beginning, having her over 340 electoral votes. We started this in March. So, I would say that the party first will react to the defeat if it happens. There are all kinds of strange upsets, but I agree with you that it certainly seems like Clinton will win and Trump will lose. And if he does lose, you're going to have recriminations from Trump himself, because his campaign headquarters will never shut down. It's on Twitter. See, it's free.
Right.
He will be there at 3 a.m., at 5 a.m.,
continuing the
at
campaign.
12 noon.
Yeah.
He'll be, his new goal will be to go after everybody who didn't support him, not just Hillary Clinton and her administration, if in fact she's elected, but also all of the Republicans who gave him problems. And he'll be around for a long time.
I put something on Facebook yesterday talking to those Republicans here in Virginia, like, why are you so quiet? And there was this NPR story said that, well, they're quiet because they're scared. They don't want Trump to go after them when all is said and done. What's your read on that? And what's the danger of them being so quiet today? I mean, will history judge them in any kind of sharp way? Or?
Well, you have the Republican Party itself, and there you're going to have, again, those factions fighting, but it's going to be very difficult for Republicans to repudiate Trump entirely, because there are so many voters that he has brought into that party. Now, I think we may find out on November 8th, it's nowhere near a majority slice. And Republicans will have to come to terms with the fact that the demographic changes in the United States, and particularly in the swing states, make it very, very difficult for them to win the presidency if they continue running from the right or as outsiders. The Republican Party was once the party of fiscal discipline and social moderation. After all, as we always say, it's the party of Lincoln.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the way, and I think it may have started even with Barry Goldwater in 1964, though he turned out to be a libertarian, it's been clear that the Republicans have been moving off track, and they have repudiated the Republican presidents they've had. An Eisenhower, a Nixon, a Ford.
They were massive liberals compared to the party today.
They couldn't get nominated today. I'm not even sure Reagan could be nominated. I know the Bushes couldn't be. So you've got a party that is at war with itself and at war with its own history. This is a problem. Not that the Democrats don't have divisions. The fact that Bernie Sanders got 40% of the delegates, incredibly, pushing him for president. I don't think he was quite ready to be president, or perhaps would ever be. It tells you that our parties are being pulled to the polls, the left and right pole. And I don't think that's healthy for the system. It's certainly not where most Americans are. They're moderate conservatives, or they're moderate liberals. Yes, you have some strong liberals, you have some strong conservatives, and you have the libertarians and so on. But basically, we're gathered around the middle. We always have been. We're kind of pragmatic by nature.
Yeah. And speaking of challenges to the system today, you can't help but notice, especially in an election year, and especially in this particular election, that there are the vast majority of Americans can't help but think of these things, and it's strengthened with the media narratives. They can't help think of these things except like it's a sports rivalry. My team versus your team. The very language that the media uses to talk about these events is like a sports team, or like war or personal combat. And it strengthens that metaphor into a reality. Like, yeah, this is really is a team. And it's, when we go to these rallies, we hold signs and we scream and chant like it's a sporting event. And it just gives someone like me pause to think, is a sports rivalry the best way to approach and deal with the challenges we face? And it was not really designed to be a system that would be approached that way.
Well, we live in a very partisan age and a very polarized era. And so while people once tuned into debate, certainly in 1960, to learn about the candidates. And you had a fair number of undecided voters or voters that would switch between the parties, because after all, we were still in the Roosevelt New Deal era, and yet Dwight Eisenhower won 2 landslides. So people were willing to go back and forth. Most people are not. Most people are, whether they admit it or not, Democrats or Republicans. They're either strong Democrats and Republicans, or they lean that way and almost always vote that way, again,
right.
whether they admit it publicly or not. So people just tune in to cheer for their team, and that's where it's like the sports teams you were suggesting.
Yeah. I'm fascinated, you mentioned Goldwater again, and I'm fascinated by the long story, the long arc of movement conservatism. In '64, Goldwater, the fringe, radical, marginalized candidate who came in and took over and knocked out all the other expected professionals who were going to win the candidacy, he lost the national election to Johnson. He loses the election, but he wins the party. And those Goldwater supporters took the party and made Reagan possible. They make movement conservatism as the guiding force of the GOP, they make that possible. So is there a chance that Trump will do the same thing, lose the election and win the party? Or do you already see no way the party's gonna let the Trump supporters control the party after that? They're just gonna do like what we saw Pence do in the election with Kaine, sort of this gaslighting strategy. That really didn't happen. It wasn't as bad as you're thinking it was. Move on.
Well, the mainstream / establishment Republicans couldn't stop Trump, with 16 alternatives, and they had 4 or 5 really strong alternatives that had money and could have potentially done it. Now, part of the reason why was because there were 16 people opposing him, and he got, during the competitive part of the primary election, he got about 38% of the vote. So that means 62% were not of the Trump faction, and while they reconciled to him more or less at the convention, they have had problems since, or some of them have had problems since, and that's why, incredibly, 26% of those in high office in the Republican Party, Senate, House, those governor, have either endorsed someone else for president or refused to endorse Trump. That is absolutely remarkable, and you do have to go back to Goldwater and McGovern to find either party with that kind of percentage refusing to associate with the nominee.
The last time we saw, if I'm not mistaken, the last time we saw a double-digit victory, I believe it's Reagan-Mondale in '84.
Yeah.
And we haven't seen anything really close to that kind of spread since then. Is there a chance that, well, obviously there's a chance, but do you think we're going to see a double-digit victory in a presidential race for the first time since '84?
I'll be surprised. It might happen. I tend to think it will be single digit. The question in my mind is whether it's high single digit, middle single digit, low single digit. And it matters, honestly, because it will help to determine whether Democrats win the Senate and make progress in the House. And there are some Democrats who think they're going to carry the House. So, we're 20-some days out, 27 days out from the time of this taping.
That would be remarkable.
It would be remarkable. I kind of doubt it for the House, though you never know. The Senate is very doable if Clinton gets a substantial percentage. She can't do it winning by 2 or 3%. She could do it by winning 6 or 7%, something like that. So we'll have to see what happens. It matters because she needs at least one house to govern. I don't know how she's going to govern without at least one house. And if she had the Senate, that would take care of her appointments. It would enable her to get Supreme Court justices at least for as long as she kept the majority.
Yeah.
You asked a very good question, though, that I really didn't answer. Is the Trump faction going to be the dominant faction in the future? I doubt it if he loses. And if he loses by a lot, the answer is certainly no. If he loses by a little, there'll be a struggle in a lot of states. Look at Virginia. Where are the activists? The activists were not necessarily with Trump, but they've reconciled to him. And these activists will not want to give up their positions of power. And that's the problem. So few people participate, especially if there are conventions rather than primaries. Even in primaries, you don't have anything close to a large representation from the middle. It tends to be from right to very right. For the Republicans.
Those who are just truly energized.
Truly energized, and they pick based on ideology, their ideology. They don't necessarily pick based on who they think can win. And a party in America that doesn't choose nominees based in large part on who's electable is probably not going to do very well.
Right, right. I want to pull the camera way back here and just confess that you can count me among those who believe we need a strong conservative party, a strong liberal party, whatever labels you want to put on them. We've had them since the debates in 1787. We've had those voices at the table in America grappling with the issues that face us. And we've always sort of, I refer to it to my students as the divide that unites us, because it's always been there. That's who we are. And I am concerned about when one of those parties sort of collapses and falls away. And what does that mean? What does that vacuum create? Because we've always relied on those two strong parties being able to engage. And if one party breaks into political sects and factions and can't coalesce and be at the table, it's a scary moment.
Yes, well, there are some people who say, well, it's about time. This way we'll get get a multi-party system, and we'll have some third parties that become at least part of coalitions to govern. Maybe.
Yeah.
I tend to think that the more stable system is the two-party system, and you certainly don't want a system where just one party is dominant, because I don't care whether
Agreed.
it's the Democrats or Republicans, you will end up with arrogance and corruption in government if
Right.
a party is nearly guaranteed to win elections. So you don't want that to happen. But look, the party that's not doing well is the party that has to reform. And I wonder, will the Republicans reform? Will they be like the Whigs? Will they split into factions and then disappear? Will some new party come to replace them? These are unanswerable questions, and we'll just have to see how Humpty Dumpty is put back together again.
We're talking with Larry Sabato of the University of Virginia Center for Politics. We'll take a very quick break. Stay with me. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're talking with Larry Sabato, the founder and the executive director of the University of Virginia Center for Politics. Larry, the Clinton campaign. What was your reaction to the news that the DNC and Debbie Wasserman had orchestrated it, or it appeared that they had orchestrated it behind the scenes and were pulling strings for Hillary Clinton, purposely setting up the Bernie Sanders campaign to fail?
Well, this was an open secret. I mean, there was absolutely no question that the DNC and, in fact, almost the entire superstructure of the Democratic Party wanted Hillary Clinton for a very simple reason. They thought she was electable, and in the end, they didn't believe Bernie Sanders could be. Now, you never know. Suppose it's a Trump versus Sanders contest. God only knows what would have happened. But by and large, Democrats felt that Clinton was prepared to be president, that she would be successful in the election, and much more importantly, she could be successful in office. And they questioned whether Sanders could. So, it's no surprise to anybody who knows what these people actually think, as opposed to what they may say or do publicly,
right.
that they were trying to help Clinton along. And Bernie Sanders wasn't surprised either.
Yeah. How do you explain, you've watched and analyzed so many campaigns over the years. What's your read on the Clinton campaign this year? How do you explain that to somebody? The good, the bad, the smart, the not so smart. What's your read on it?
In terms of organization, as I think people are going to see November 8th, it is superb. It is actually better than the two Obama campaigns.
Which
Now,
says quite a lot, because the ground game in those campaigns was phenomenal.
exactly. You know, their data analytics, their get out the vote, voter organization, early voting side of things, they're better than the Obama campaign. Of course, this has been a process. They have built up a system that works, and the Obama people really have all come on board for Clinton. Most of them did it during the primaries. So they have done a terrific job, and they are producing early votes like you wouldn't believe in some of the swing states. And remember, 40% of Americans will have voted before Election Day. 40%.
Is it that high?
It's that high. Last time it was 32. And this time we're going up to somewhere around 40%. Eventually, a majority, it's clear probably by 2020, a majority will vote ahead of Election Day. Look, this is part of the polarized era. People know who they're for. There are very few true
They're ready to
undecideds.
just get this over with and vote.
Very few undecideds, really. You know, people say they're undecided, but they aren't. When you talk to them, you can figure out who they're for. So this, in terms of that, the Clinton campaign is very, very strong. Now, where it's weak, is, I think, in terms of Clinton's ability to connect and enthuse. She is very careful. She is very lawyerly. She does not show her emotions easily. That can be a good thing, can be a bad thing, but I'm simply saying, as a campaigner, she is not Bill Clinton.
Exactly.
She is Hillary Clinton.
Right,
you know? And
it's one reason they were
different.
made a good team, because they staffed each other's weakness.
Precisely so. But and I think it's going to be interesting if she is elected to watch her presidency and whether she can develop that other side, whether she can feel everyone's pain, as Bill was so good at doing for 8 years. But she also brings other things to the table. Even Bill Clinton says privately, at least, that she's smarter than he is, and she is very, very smart. Now, you may like or dislike what she does, but in terms of capability, there's no question that she has those capabilities to be president.
Let me ask about the capability of journalism this campaign season. What's been your observation of the reporters who write about and discuss? We've probably never had in the history of American politics so much national discussion now, because there's so many more kinds of platforms and people engaged in these conversations.
Yes, and they're much more diverse. You know, I still hear, particularly from Republicans, constantly how biased the media are. No, the media are not a group, just like professors aren't a group. You know, we don't all act alike, teach alike, say the same things. The same is true with the media. It's actually very diverse, partly because of social media, partly because so many of the organizations are now internet-based. You go from far right to far left and everything in between, and everybody picks a different set of organizations. We all bookmark different things. So quit your complaining. You know, when we grew up, particularly me, I'm a lot older than you, we had almost nothing. You had maybe a morning paper and an afternoon paper, and you had 3 networks all reporting the same stories in about the same order from a bunch of white males, one right after the other. Okay, so things have gotten better, and people need to recognize that.
And incredibly more diverse.
Incredibly more diverse. And you know, I don't want to get into whether the moderators were biased at a debate. I would just say, even if they were, it doesn't matter that much, because the people watching already know, for the most part, who they're for, and they're filtering all this information through their own partisan screens. It's not like they're converting millions of voters, but people never see this. They get angry, they get mad, you know, then we hear from them at the Center for Politics.
Yes. Speaking of the Center for Politics, there's a couple items I want to ask you about, and let's just start with, where is the center today? This truly amazing organization that you created out of whole cloth at the University of Virginia to study, to teach, to do research. Where is the center today, and where's it going in the 21st century?
Well, it's first of all, I had a lot of help. It's not just me. We had tons of people who were willing to help us, willing to make sizable contributions, great staff members who really work very, very hard and are very competent. So essentially what we're doing is what we've always done. We're dedicated to civic education and civic participation, both at home and abroad. One of our signature programs during elections is the Crystal Ball. And the Crystal Ball comes out once or twice a week, and we give everybody updated electoral maps and updated analyses of the Senate races and the House races and the governor's races and lots of other things, and people love that. And we have a giant program stretching over all 50 states involving tens of thousands of teachers, giving them civic materials for free so that they can introduce them into the classroom and educate new generations of Americans better than, say, the older generations have been educated in civics.
That's remarkable to say, though. There's generations of American citizens who've learned about the political process thanks to the Center for Politics at UVA and dedicated teachers who wanted to get these materials in front of them.
Exactly, and the key is we provide them for free. You see, it reintroduces civics into school systems that have ditched civics because they have other priorities. Well, when something's provided free, I've learned schools tend to take it.
They like that.
They like that. And by the way, we have an international division now. We have brought into this country for weeks at a time hundreds and hundreds of emerging leaders and young people from countries all over the world. We're up to almost 40 different countries. Our next is Mongolia, interestingly, early in the year. We just had North Africa and the Middle East. But they come and they stay and they learn about American democracy, and they also tell us about their systems. We learn from them, they learn from us. And you know, it's much more difficult to be anti-American once you've been there, you've gotten to know people, and you understand why the system works or doesn't work the way it does.
Right.
So we're excited about that too.
Yeah. There's also a new documentary.
Yes.
Y'all produce a documentary every year looking at a moment in politics and personalities and issues. And what's the newest documentary for 2016?
The newest documentary, which we do in partnership with American Public Television and the local community idea stations in Richmond and Charlottesville, is called Feeling Good About America. And
I like that title.
Well, we figured it would appeal, and it comes right out of a TV ad for President Ford in 1976 during the bicentennial year. And this documentary is about two candidates who, unlike this year, had very high favorabilities even during the campaign. Once the campaign was over, people joined back together, gave a long honeymoon to President Carter. Whatever you think about what Carter did later, he had a long honeymoon. And those two, Ford and Carter, joined together on a number of major projects during the rest of President Ford's life. This is the way American democracy should work, and it's why we picked it, because we could see 8 or 9 months ago what was going to happen this year.
An example of the opposite of that.
An example of the opposite. We want to remind people that we can do it better. We have done it better, and we can do it better in the future.
Thank you, Larry, very much.
Thank you so much, Coy.
The website, again, go there now and learn more, is centerforpolitics.org. And if you want to read the crystal ball like I do every week, it's centerforpolitics.org/crystal ball. Larry Sabato is the founder and executive director of the University of Virginia Center for Politics. I'm Coy Barefoot. You can find the complete archive of this program online at mediaandcitizenship.org. Y'all have a terrific week and be good to each other.